So welcome to this panel discussion titled COVID-19 Impact on LGBTQI Catholics Around the World. My name is Leo Igashira. I was a Dignity USA board member from 2004 to 2016, and I participated in all three global network of Rainbow Catholic Assemblies, which was Rome in 2015, Munich in 2017, and Chicago in 2019. My preferred pronouns are he and him. I am a cisgender Japanese American from Seattle, Washington. So as I stated to some of you earlier, this session is being recorded on August 30th for the Dignity USA virtual meeting, September 11th and 12th. It's early in the morning in Seattle, mid-afternoon in Italy, Kenya, and South Africa, and late night in the Philippines. So I really very much appreciate everyone's willingness to give of your time at inconvenient hours to be a part of this discussion. I'm really honored to moderate this discussion and to introduce all the panelists. As I mentioned your name, please tell us a little bit about yourself, just for a minute, 1 minute, and include your preferred pronouns, what you do for a living, and your involvement with GNRC. So we'll start with Chris. Please go ahead.
Hi, everybody. It's amazing to be here with you representing Latin America to discuss the COVID situation in the region. I'm a Brazilian non-binary person, preferred pronouns she, her, hers, and a psychologist living in Rio de Janeiro. I'm currently part of the board of the National Network of LGBT Catholic groups in Brazil, as well as of the GNRC board as diversity officer. As a doctorate student, I researched the Christian feminists and Christian LGBTQI plus organized movements here in Brazil.
Give some light.
Thank you very much, Chris. Luca, let's go with you next.
Hi, everybody, and thank you for inviting me here. I'm very happy to be here. I'm Italian. I was born in Turin, a city in the north part of the country. I have a degree in law, and I'm specialized in alternative dispute resolutions, which I consider to be the best way to resolve conflicts. I co-founded the LGBT Christian group called La Scala di Giacobbe, which has now been active for 18 years, together with Don Franco Barbero, a charismatic priest of the Catholic Church, actively involved in the pastoral care of LGBTQ people. I am a co-founder of Cammini di Speranza, and I'm a volunteer of Progetto Lambda, a project first of its kind in Italy, aimed to assisting elderly LGBT people. I'm in touch with similar organizations both in Europe, Spain, and Germany, and in the United States, and Way Health Aging project in Boston, as I strongly believe that the LGBT community should be more aware of the issue and needs relating to its elderly members. I took part in the foundation of GNRC in Rome, in the gathering of Manage, and in Chicago in 2019.
Thank you very much, Luca. Liki, thank you very much for joining us. Please tell us a little bit about yourself, your preferred pronouns, what you do for a living, and your involvement with GNRC.
My name is Liki Ochieng, known as Liki. I work for an organization known as KISPED Kenya. So KISPED Kenya is an LGBTQ membership organization that uses the tool of arts, media, and sports to address the issues and create awareness within our societies on matters related to human rights within our society. Apart from that, I'm also a documentary producer and a scriptwriter and actor. I'm also part of the NDIC, and for the part of the last convening, I was supported the NDIC in terms of documenting the event. So basically, I gave them the support in terms of documentary production during that period.
Thank you very much, Leaky. Dumi, welcome. Can you tell us a little about yourself, please?
Thanks, Leo, and hi, everybody. I'm Dumisani Dube. I'm a Zimbabwean. I'm living in South Africa. I came to South Africa in 2009. I moved here for greener pastures. I am currently working as an editor of Exit newspaper, which is an LGBTI newspaper here in South Africa. And also I'm a member and a chairperson of the Holy Trinity Catholic Church LGBTI ministry, which is based in Braamfontein here in Johannesburg. My first assembly with the GNRC was in 2017 in Munich. And since then I've been very active, and I've been active in our region, and also I was elected treasurer into the board in 2019. And I only left the due to work pressure. I only left the post for someone else who could serve better. But basically that's it. Holy Trinity LGBTI ministry deals with mostly refugees who come from different countries looking for greener pastures, and also running away from homophobic situations in their home countries. So we gather them all together, and we hold meetings just to give them support, and also try and document them so that they can find employment or education here in South Africa. And we try by all means to raise funds for them to do so. So yeah, basically that's me.
Thanks very much, Dumi. And now, Miel, a little bit about yourself.
Okay, I'm Miel from the Philippines. I have a degree in political science. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am a researcher and a writer. Currently, I am serving as the executive director of Rainbow Catholic Philippines. And I attended my first GNRC assembly was the 2019 assembly in Chicago, where I met Luca, Leo, Dumi, and Vicky. That's about it.
Thanks very much. I'll now ask each of you a series of questions, and I'd like you to speak uninterrupted for about 3 minutes, maybe 3 or 4 minutes. And then once everyone has had a chance to speak, I'll go on to the next set of questions. So you'll each have 5 more times to speak your mind and tell us a little bit about the situation of COVID in your country. So I'll do it in the order that I originally started the introduction. So this question will first go to Chris, and then Luca, and then we'll go in order. So what was the COVID situation like in your country 1 year ago? And what is it like now? Do you have the Delta variant going around your country? And speak of the bit of the diversity of experiences across the region. So, when you talk about Brazil, maybe include some of the other Latin American countries. So go ahead, Chris.
Yes, I've asked for our friends in Latin America to help me out with that. So I've collected some information. I'll try to convey them, share them with you here. In general, COVID hit very hard Latin America, although in some countries the containment measures were initially effective, such as in Argentina and Peru. The lack of rigor in the lockdowns and the lack of vaccines in several places allowed a high circulation of the virus, leading to the emergence of dangerous variants like in northern Brazil and in the Andean region. Especially in Brazil, we reached the level of more than 1,000 deaths per day in the first months of the pandemic. And only now, a year later, are we maintaining a daily average of deaths below 1,000. In the first 3 months of this year, we reached 3,000 daily deaths. With the Delta variant, even countries that had been going through the pandemic in a relatively safe situation, such as Argentina, saw the number of cases increase, and most countries are already feeling the impact of the Delta variant or preparing to start suffering its effects very soon. Now, several countries are discussing the third dose, which, such as Chile, Uruguay, and Brazil itself. Although here, more than half the population still has only the first dose.
Thank you very much, Chris. Luca, what was the COVID situation in Italy a year ago? I know it was one of the worst countries.
Yes, Italy has been one of the first and of the most affected countries, and it had to deal with an already weak economic condition and cuts to public health service due to budgetary requirements from the last decade, something that made the situation even more dramatic. The health situation before the pandemic, so the protection of elderly people, has a milestone since aging process of the Italian population was strong and with a low fertility rate. The emergency required the reorganization and increase of resources. In the initial phase of the pandemic, access to treatment could have been diluted to cope with the very high number of hospitalization of COVID-19 patients that occurred during the lockdown in March 2020, the first lockdown in March 2020. In spite of the dramatic situation, the health professionals worked in an exemplary manner, even without suitable and effective protection measures in the first days of the pandemic. The situation changed for the better from June 2020 on. And if we consider the issue from an European perspective, it's to be noted that the European Union and its member states, after an initial division, worked and are still working together to reinforce national healthcare systems and contain the spread of the virus and its variant. At the same time, the European Union and its members countries are taking action to mitigate the socio-economic impact of COVID-19 and support the recovery. These activities are having positive effects. Current data shows that the Delta variant is dominant all over Europe, but the situation is currently under control thanks to the decision taken virtually in any country, your country, to step up the vaccination programs. But until the 80% of the population is protected, EU needs to keep the circulation of Delta virus low by strictly adhering to public health measures like social distancing and wearing the mask. That's the situation at the moment.
Thank you very much, Luca. Liki, can you tell us a little bit about Kenya, and if you can expound on East Africa, that would be great. By the way, I put the question in the chat so you can look over that if you want. Liki, go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you very much. So in Kenya, particularly, the first reported case on COVID-19 was on last year, March. And the numbers kept on increasing between March, April, and May. And these really forced the government to put a lot of mitigations and measures in place to make sure that there's containment of that specific virus. So one of the things that was put into place was the aspect of lockdown, especially on some areas that were identified as major hotspots for the COVID-19. So majorly like the capital city, like Nairobi and another city in Mombasa, were the major areas that had a high rate of COVID-19 infections. So apart from that, the government also tried as much as possible to make sure that the other public spaces or places where people were convening regularly, like the open air market, the churches, the mosques, the clubs, so schools, and so all those places were closed for a period of time to make sure that at least everyone is safe during that specific period. There are a lot of campaigns that also put in place to make sure that the community is much well sensitized about this specific virus, in terms of also making sure that people sanitize, people have masks, and people make sure that there's that aspect of social distancing within the places or the places where we work. So especially for also the people that were working in various organization or institution, the other aspect that we also tried as much as possible to emphasize the aspect of making sure that people work from home, because you never know that any other person who's come from work, maybe they have the virus or not. So there are various measures that were put in place, both at individual level and also at the government, that were inspired by the government to make sure that their citizens are much safe. Talking about the East Africa, I may not have the clear rates of what maybe was happening in Uganda or Tanzania, but what I know that Tanzania had a very, very rare case, especially in East Africa, with their president, the former president, the late Magufuli, who was much against the aspect of vaccination, and is one of the person who believed that COVID was not real at that point. So until the time he passed on, then the current president is now the one who's trying to push to make sure that even their citizens are tested and also vaccinated during this period. So another measures that also put in place, for instance, if you want to cross to the other country, there's the issue of making sure that you have a certificate that proves that you are COVID negative free. So there are also that measures that also put in our borders between Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, and Rwanda. So apart from that, the other thing that also tried to make sure that there's various regular campaign on people being tested, because at certain point the virus came with various symptoms that people could not identify if it's either normal sickness or it's COVID-19 related cases. So we tried as much as make sure we sensitize the public to go for tests so that we can really confirm also the cases. So at this point in Kenya, we are at the 13% of the population are highly infected with the virus, and the numbers keep on increasing day by day. And so one thing that we have also tried as much as possible to put in place is to make sure that there's that aspect of cessation, where people are not allowed to move into different geographical areas, especially the areas that are marked as a hotspot within the country, so that to make sure that there's that a regulation that are put in place for that aspect. And for instance, if you want to move from one place to another, you either have to be a certificate that is given by government to allow you to move from this area to another area. And also apart from that, you also have to have a certificate that indicates that you are COVID negative free. So also one thing that also been put into place and into measures to make sure that the aspect of curfew. So in Kenya, we have curfew which starts from 10 p.m. at night and then at 4 o'clock. So those are the mitigation that also have been put into place to make sure that we contain the virus. And talking about the Delta, at currently we say that we have a very few cases of the Delta virus that have been reported by the government in the country.
Thank you very much, Liki. Dumi, what about Southern Africa?
Well, Southern Africa is nothing but the same with the rest of the world and the rest of Africa. When lockdown was introduced in last year, no one was really prepared. It was introduced as for the first time they said it was 2 weeks, but when it was extended, people started to panic, and as so many lost their jobs, people were losing their lives, and life dropped from bad to worse for the ordinary person. People were still in denial. They didn't know, they didn't want to admit that COVID was here and it was here to stay. The lockdown rules took away a lot from people. It took away their livelihoods. It took away their jobs. We saw the increase in GBV cases, gender-based violent cases, and the matters of queer people here in South Africa escalated. And there was a lot of problems, as I said, that we at Holy Trinity we deal with refugees and maybe migrants coming from other countries, and so people cannot travel due because they cannot do COVID tests because they cannot afford them. Those that are needed mostly when you are traveling, they cannot see their families, they cannot be with them. So that caused a lot of mental health unstableness and the fear also of being infected. Looking at the moment, people are now more vigilant and there is more understanding of the virus. And also simply because this can be testified by that many people are going out in numbers to get vaccinated and getting their COVID test. And according to some social media posts that they are posting, you can see that people are now agreeing, even though there are people who are still anti-vaccine. But the unemployment has become so high, and poverty has gone wild. Yeah, so basically, and we have had a few cases of the Delta variant here in South Africa. I do not have the exact number of how many. So the situation is still the same. People are living, but with lots of fear. Yet there is others that do not really understand what is going on. But it is very difficult for the LGBTIQ refugees that we work with. We have seen by the way we have received so many requests that they do not have food, they do not have places to stay, in which they do not have transport to go to do some peace job. So it has become worse, and it is very bad for our community at the moment. Leo?
Thank you very much, Dumi. Miel, what about in Philippines? And if you can speak a little bit about your neighboring countries, that would be great.
Okay. Basically, at the start of the pandemic, almost all countries in Asia had the same knee-jerk reaction, was to close borders and lockdowns, and for the most part in the beginning months it was really effective, especially for countries like the Philippines. That's an archipelagic country, so if we close our borders, we limit the infection to just some of the islands and not the others. um, yeah, it's the same with Thailand. For a time, they really had low cases when they closed their borders. So did Vietnam. Um, but as we started opening up again, the cases were rising. Just a comparison. Last year, August 30, the Philippines was averaging around 4,000 cases a day, new cases. And we only had a total of 217,000 cases total. Now, we actually have our our highest to date. That's 22,300 plus cases, new cases today. That's the highest, and there's more than 1.9 million Filipinos affected by the coronavirus. Although the pros of uh, the Filipinos are really a close knit family. So when the lockdown happened, everybody just can't wait to go back to their provinces. But that's what brought the COVID to other provinces in the Philippines when we started opening up again and people were allowed to travel from one province to the next. So the virus spread. But at around December, it was manageable because we only had 1,000 cases a day. But come 2021, with the new variants entering the Philippines, first it was the Alpha variant, and then now it's the Delta variant. That's like everywhere else, it's the dominant. I think they're saying that Delta variant has been found in every region of the country now. So when we opened, before it was just the gateway provinces, cities where they have the airports and the ports that were hit by COVID. So it was easy to contain because it was just hotspots within several or a number of provinces. But right now, it's we're it's really bleak right now. I mean, I live beside three hospitals, and it's like we hear ambulances every hour, and you would only think it's COVID because it's the COVID hospital that's like down the street, and they have given notices already that they're like full capacity. In the whole of Metro Manila, they've said that we already reached 70% hospital utilization.
Mm.
And it's just in this, they're saying that it's still not the peak yet. So it will still get worse before it gets better. But we're still under lockdown. We've been on lockdown for more than a year already, varying degrees of lockdown, but basically still in lockdown. And but the problem is, since I guess the problem with being on lockdown for a long time, people get used to being on lockdown and they get to be complacent. I mean, people are not that afraid anymore because the death toll, they would say it's like what, 1.9, 1.6%. So only 33,000 has died, but that's still a big number. That's more than 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 like a city in the Philippines. So uh, that's the problem that we have now. This started around June when we started having the Delta variant in the Philippines, and the cases have been increasing daily. Um, the government, the spending is high because to finance a lockdown, they have to provide economic packages for people. I can't even talk about how the mental effect of this to Filipinos who are close to their families. It took me a year before I was able to come home and see my parents because I was so scared of bringing the virus to them, and it's the same for everyone I know. So I hope it will get better right now, but uh, we're not really. We're hoping for it to get better, but we're preparing for the worst.
Thanks very much, Miel. And the next series of questions, many of you have already touched on it, so you don't need to go over it. And that was, how has your government reacted? But I do want to know, and I'm going to put this question in chat, how is testing access in your country, in your region? How is vaccine access? And how do you feel about countries like the US talking about a third booster shot when many countries have less than 10% of their population vaccinated? Chris, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, Latin America in general has historically suffered from political disputes, lack of consistency of democratic institutions, and serious corruption problems. And the arrival of the pandemic took place in that context. Governments initially reacted in different ways. I haven't said much about that, but in Argentina, there were lockdowns that were effective in containing COVID at first. In Brazil and Mexico, the federal governments took a political stance of belittling the impact of the pandemic and investing in herd immunity, which caused COVID to spread rapidly. However, in some places, governments have been accused of hiding the real numbers. For example, in Peru, where a few months ago the calculation was revised and the official death toll was increased a lot. According to experts, there's a lot of underreporting throughout the region. In Brazil, especially where the president himself refuses to be vaccinated, there was very little investment in vaccines. The vaccination here started too late and is going too slowly. And now we are seeing investigations reporting corruption in the purchase of vaccines, not only in Brazil, but in Peru, for instance. At first, only a wealthy elite had access to vaccination. Vaccines arrived without the majority of the population even knowing it, while authorities, including ecclesiastic authorities, were being secretly vaccinated. And we have also very little testing. So things are going too slowly and perspectives are really dim here.
Thanks, Chris. Luca?
The access to the vaccine in Italy is free and is open to citizens and refugees. We have universal and free health service, a national health service that used to work very well, but over the last 10 years, it suffered from a lot of cuts due to budgetary requirements. This had a big this is very bad for in this moment, but the access is free both in Italy and in Europe. In Italy, people is vaccinated. It can be vaccinated from 12 years, for the age of 12 years, to, of course, elderly people. And the government is debating whether extend the access to the vaccine to young people from 6 to 12 years old. The main problem we are facing now is that a part of people, of society, of the population is against vaccine. No-vax people is an important part of the people, about 20–25%, and is organizing manifestations and campaign against the vaccine. This is at the moment is growing. This phenomenon is growing and is becoming very important in the politics debate. Far-right parties in Italy are openly no-vax, and so they support this part of the population. And we don't know what will be the situation, what can happen, but this campaign is very present and is, I think, a danger in the fight against COVID.
Thanks very much, Luca. Leaky, can you tell us about access to tests and vaccines in Kenya and East Africa?
So basically, at this point, access to vaccination and tests is much easier compared to last year, and the vaccinations are being given out for free in different health centers and health services within the country. And the priority for this vaccination mostly is being focused on the essential service providers. In these cases, we talk about the doctors, we talk about the teachers, and we talk about the people who are vulnerable for this specific infection. So at the moment at the country, we have 2 million doses of the vaccine that have been so far provided, and that is estimated around that 2.6% of the Kenyan population have so far been vaccinated on these cases. So what the government is also trying to just to emphasize and to push is people to go for this vaccination, because we have 2 doses of vaccine that are being given. So there's first vaccine that is being given, then after 2 months or 3 months, then you go for your second dose. So basically that has been much easy for people to access. But there's also a lot of myths and misconceptions that also revolved around the vaccination process, because majority of people are still scared to access those vaccines, because people don't know what next, or people don't have a real factor of the side effects that vaccine has towards their body. So I think one of the things that also the government is also trying to put in place is to make sure that there's a lot of awareness that is being created to the society, so that they can also understand this vaccine also had some other side effects once it were injected, in terms of other some people have complained of severe headache. Some people have raised concern about being dizzy throughout. So those are the things that the society is also being informed that when you're vaccinated, these are the things that this vaccine will also react to the body for a certain period of time. And also apart from that, talking about the East Africa, for instance, Uganda has been enrolling that vaccine process for a long period of time, the same as Kenya. But in our neighboring country like Tanzania, I can say that they are not like 2 months into that process, because remember when the other president was, the late president was still there, they were not even conducting the test for this virus. They never believed that this virus exists in their country. So until the current president who later came in and introduced that aspect of people to go for tests and people to be vaccinated. So they're much behind us in terms of even the data. In terms of even releasing the data, they never had the exact data of people who have been infected with this specific virus. So it's well now they're starting the process of testing and making sure that people are vaccinated. Rwanda are doing better compared to Kenya, and in some cases they are also working hand in hand with South Africa in terms of production of this vaccine, and make sure that they are distributed within across East Africa. So far the vaccination process is something that is really working out well for Kenya, and people are much enrolling for these services as well.
Great, thank you very much, Liki. And Dumi.
Yes, Leo. Access to the vaccine here in South Africa and maybe other Southern African countries is free in all government institutions, and a certain amount is paid if we want to go to private practices. Here it was introduced in stages of age. We started with the adults, and so far probably 25% plus or minus the 25% of the population has been vaccinated. There are some who are still anti-vaccine and campaigning against it on social media, and some religious institutions who are passing on different conspiracy theories to discourage people from taking the vaccines. And of course, yes, there is also some side effects that also worry other people, that I may not recover from this, I may not recover from that. But then so far, just like anybody else, the vaccine process is going on very well and smoothly. Leo?
Great, thank you. Miel.
Testing in the Philippines when the pandemic started was really expensive. It was around $150 if you convert it to US dollars per test. So it really discouraged people from having themselves tested. Right now, the rate is around $70, but you can get free testing if you go to health services, government health services. But people don't usually go there because that would entail you being brought to isolation and your family put on lockdown. So they don't really I mean, unless you have a choice, they would, if they're not really sure that they're COVID positive and they just want to find out, or if they need it for work or for travel, you have to shell out around 70 US dollars to get yourself tested. That's the RT-PCR test. As for the vaccine is free. The government gives the vaccine for free, but they have the priority for the vaccine rollout. The first priorities were the frontliners, the nurses, the medical frontliners, and then the senior citizens, and then the adult population with comorbidities, and then the economic frontliners, the workers and the employees. Right now, there are 13.2 million fully vaccinated Filipinos, with 17.5 million have gotten their first dose already. The government aims to vaccinate around 58 million by the year end, because there's a 104 million, that's the population of the Philippines. So they're aiming for that 60% more or less of the population by the year end. So free and vaccine are not available commercially. It's all from the government. So you really have to like line to book online if you are qualified for the prior, because they do it in waves. Like for now it's just for the senior citizens, and then for the frontliners, and for the adults with comorbidities. So you wait your turn. So maybe that's the reason why a lot of there's a time that like a group, like most new cases were from the 25 to 49-year-old bracket, because these are the people who go to work but are not really yet priority when it comes to the vaccine, because they're not seniors, they're not people with comorbidities or frontliners. So right now, we are on lockdown, but we still have the vaccine, and they're doing it double time, because they know that that's the only way we could really temper the spread of this virus.
Thank you, Miguel. Appreciate it very much. Okay, thanks very much for your insights. This next question may or may not be too relevant, because I'm not sure if, except for Dumi's comment that LGBTQ refugees were very much impacted by COVID. I'm not sure if LGBT people in other areas of the world were also impacted. So if applicable, how did the pandemic impact the work of your group and others in the region who are part of GNRC? And did LGBTQ people have any special challenges or barriers to deal with the pandemic? And like I said, Dumi has already addressed that, especially with respect to refugees, but what about the others? And were Catholic leaders helpful in dealing with the pandemic? Were your bishops and cardinals advocating for vaccines? Were they silent, or were they adding extra burdens? So I put the question in chat. So Chris, go first.
Well, COVID has had a huge toll on our countries, our lives, and our families, but it had an unexpected consequence in terms of our group's work. The fact that we started doing virtual activities allowed people from different places in our countries and across the entire region to have access to our virtual activities. That was the case in Brazil and Mexico and Costa Rica, for example. But in some places like Mexico and some places in Brazil, as the months went by, the virtual activities began to deflate. In Brazil, we had to postpone our third national meeting of 2020 to the end of 2021. And in Mexico, the holding of the second national meeting is in an undefined situation. In any case, virtual activities allowed the groups in the region to hold more regional meetings and get to know each other and work together better. And we also ended up by having some more contacts with GNRC itself. So in that way, there's increased integration. However, the pandemic has hardly affected has terribly affected the LGBTQI plus community, especially younger people and trans people. Mainly by increasing their economic vulnerability. So lockdowns, we have lots of trans people on the streets, living on the streets. And lockdowns also often mean that LGBTQI plus youth need to return home to families that are often unwelcoming and LGBTI phobic. Which means different types of violence, especially of religious, emotional, spiritual, and not rarely physical violence in the context of a very conservative Christian Latin America. Catholic leaders at best ignore us and do not dialogue with us, and in some cases contribute to attacks against our communities. Perhaps more than church leaders, in Latin America, we have a context of growing Christian conservatism and a true anti-rights and anti-gender moral crusades that has profoundly impacted not only our community of LGBTQI plus Christians and Catholics, but also our struggle for civil rights. Despite these, there have been initiatives by some Catholic leaders and priests who have supported us. And in any case, as a Catholic LGBTQI plus movement, we continue to move and continue our work, seeking alliances and dialogue with other Christian groups, not only Catholics and not only LGBTQI plus. Also, the Latin American Church is preparing for an ecclesial assembly at the end of this year. And at the request of Pope Francis, a wide-ranging listening process was carried out, which ends tomorrow. And as Latin America GNRC, we have organized to participate and try to bring the theme of LGBTQI plus people to the discussions so that we can make ourselves heard by the bishops.
Thanks very much, Chris. It was interesting for you to point out that the COVID situation has allowed more interaction among GNRC people. So that was a positive aspect that I didn't quite expect from you to hear. Luca, what's going on over in Italy and nearby areas of Europe?
Yes, in the first days of the pandemic, the main problem of Community Speranza and the other Catholics groups, rainbow groups, had to deal with was to rethink all the activities in a virtual way. In a few weeks, we were able to carry on all our activities or gatherings online. That was a success, I think. We didn't postpone the Italian national meeting of Christian groups, but we organized it online, and the same for the European meeting that was organized online. Unfortunately, to stress that LGBT people had to take on some specific problems in Europe that I would like to shortly enumerate. The first problem was the health and access to health. LGBT people have significantly lower health outcomes due to stigma and discrimination, both in Italy and in other European countries. Pre-existing limitation in LGBT affirming healthcare were exacerbated as the healthcare system redirected their resources and access to sexual and reproductive health was negatively impacted. The second problem was that recent years have seen a rise in divisive and hateful rhetoric in election campaign and public discourses, in particular in Poland, in Hungary, in part in Italy and in France. Unfortunately, in many countries across the region, the public health crisis is being used as another opportunity by religious leaders and hostile politicians and governments to blame LGBT people for social problems and social and economic problems. Another point that I would like to stress is the domestic violence. Social distancing has proven to be particularly difficult for those who have been rejected by their families or might face LGBT phobia from their families members and were forced to be in confinement with them. This was the main problem. The lockdown forced trans people, LGBT people to be in confinement with parents, siblings that are against them. So this is a very sensitive problem. Another question is the access to justice and other legal processes. Legal, judicial, and administrative processes are very important for LGBT people, for refugees, for rainbow families, and all these processes has been strongly impacted by the crisis. Catholic leaders were in some cases unhelpful and blamed LGBT people for the coronavirus pandemic. That is very, very sad. But a group of Catholic leaders, bishops, for example, 5, 6 Italian bishops, offered words of encouragement, advice, and support to LGBT members of the church and the Rainbow Catholics group. So this is a positive action of a good number of Catholic leaders.
Thanks very much, Luca. Leaky.
Yeah, so basically just to start with us as we were much affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. As a testicle group, majorly our advocacy work is to interact with people within a society on one-to-one interaction. So by the measures that were put into place by the government, so this really hinders our activities as organization, and we much focus on various online campaigning strategies in place. So we are not in a position to conduct regularly activities that we used to conduct, but we interacted with the society and create this awareness to different artistical genre as well. So this forced us to close our office for a quite period of time, so as to make sure that our staffs, our membership, and our volunteers are safe during this pandemic period, and also to make sure that our target audience, especially the people that we interact with in the society, are also much safe, because there was an aspect of social distancing that also put into place by the government to make sure that there's no gathering that was taking place within the country. So we have to make sure that we abide with those regulations that are put in place by the government, so as to make sure that as an organization and also the society that we really want to reach out to, everyone is safe during that period. Talking about the issue that the LGBTQ person were facing, LGBTQ person faced a lot during this COVID-19 pandemic. One of the issues that really was a major challenge aspect of majority of them lost their job, because remember that a lot of factories, a lot of companies, a lot of businesses was stopped during that period. And remember, majority of the LGBTQ person, especially in the African context, depends on the aspect of mouth to hand kind of job related. And realize when these jobs are shut down, then at the end of the day, these people end up losing their daily income generating activities, or their daily income, or that's any activity that brings them income daily. So realize that a lot of people lost their job, and especially the LGBTIQ community. So as an organization, we really received a lot of cases of LGBTIQ persons who are not in a position to pay their rent, or not in a position to support their medical bills, or not in a position to support their daily necessities as a person. So we really put into place different mechanisms where we try as much as possible to resource from different partners to make sure that we give LGBTQ persons, our membership, and people within the region basic needs. So sometimes we could donate maize flour, sometimes we could donate clothing and other basic necessities, and also to make sure that they have access to various things like masks and sanitizers. So those are the major challenges that they are facing, because people lost their job based on what was really happening, and also based on the mitigation that the government really put in place to make sure that the aspect of people working from home. Another issue when we come to the issues of access to health, especially sexual reproductive health issues, was a major challenge for LGBTQ persons to access these services, because we realized much of focus was shifted to COVID-19. So we realized that even the health facilities, much of their energy and emphasis were on COVID related issues. And then the issues of sexual reproductive health now was much neglected. and realize that as LGBTQ people, especially the gay community, are much vulnerable to various sexual transmitted infections. So these cases were so much high, and we really had to depend on private hospitals to offer these services to sexual minority persons, especially the MSMs person, and also male sex workers within the region. So at this point, at least we can say that the rate has reduced, because now at least there's that 50-50 balance, because you have tried as much as possible so to make sure that you have conversation with the health service providers to make sure that these services are put into place and are still in continue, because health services, especially when it comes to sexual reproductive health, are the matters that need to be addressed in terms of agencies of it. So we also make sure that we also supply the commodities like lubricants and condom to LGBTQ persons, especially the gay men and MSMs within the society, so that we make sure that they are also safe in terms of sexual reproductive health issues. Another challenge that LGBTQ persons really face is the aspect of the mental health, because this pandemic was much scary, and no one was much prepared for this. So this is something that really got everyone unaware. So that aspect also of the mental health was a major issue. Also remember that these are same person who still face a lot of the burden in relation to homophobic and stigma discrimination. At the same time, that this aspect of the pandemic that also come in place. At the same time, this person has also lost his job, is not in a position to work. So you realize all these things are affecting one person. It was a major challenge. And as an organization, one of the things that we are also trying to put in place is to have that mental session awareness, where we have a session with LGBTQ person and talk about the issues that affected us during the pandemic period. Talking about the role that the priests play during this moment. Remember that in the country, all the churches were closed during this period, and much of the focus on the issues relating to COVID-19 were left for the government to handle. So there was a less impact from the religious sectors, or there was less impact from the priests concerning the matters to do with COVID-19.
Thank you very much, Leaky. Dumi.
Yes, it looks like that most of the challenges that everybody's facing, we are facing as well. And I wouldn't want to repeat all those, but I would just like to say that there was a huge toll on our ministry, especially because we are used to having physical meetings, and physical contact with us is very much important, as we feel like we are family. Imagine within the LGBTI community, imagine being stuck up with someone, being locked down with someone who is homophobic, with a family that is homophobic, a family that doesn't want you. Probably staying with a partner that is abusive to you. In lockdown, you cannot even move away from that particular person, just because you're locked down in that particular city and you cannot go anywhere. You have no other people to go to, because they're also afraid that you might infect them with COVID. So there's a lot that has affected the LGBTI community. My colleague just said right now that mental health issues also need to be taken into consideration. There is access to essential services like the Home Affairs. Right now, it is closed to document all those that came in within undocumented into South Africa. They're closed, and that leaves them uncertain of their future here in this country. And also that bothers them. What is my tomorrow going to be like? And also, there is no church attendance to boost their spiritual being and to boost their spiritual self. And there is no communion to bring them together with the Lord. So all those things are a major factor, and they affect us. And also something that affected the work within the ministries, that many funders redirected their funding to COVID-related issues. And some of our proposals for some of the work that we're supposed to do were put on hold, or maybe forgotten forever, which this kind of putting all our work to a hold to the planned work. So yeah, and basically there is a lot that has happened during this this period, maybe this 1.5 year within the LGBTI community, especially mental health, physical abuse, emotional abuse, a lot has affected the work, and we cannot do anything. If anyone is affected now, we need to have a clearance certificate to go to that particular space, and that particular space cannot be accessed before you get the certificate, and the certificate takes quite some time to come out if you are not an essential worker, recognized essential worker. So it's quite a mess at the moment, but with the help of the Lord, we know we will get there. Leo?
Thank you, Dumi. Miel.
Just like what Chris said earlier, Rainbow Catholics Philippines is a primarily an online, or all our activities prior to the pandemic were basically online. So we were able to create more of these activities, and the upside is there were a lot of people who reached out, who attended their activities because they're stuck at home, and they were looking for um, gatherings or um, prayer groups that they could be part of. Because at the start, especially during the first few months of the pandemic, uh, there was a spike in the number of domestic violence cases, suicides, especially of those who are living with their families. Then we were able to, and we were also able to connect with different regional groups like um, uh, the group of uh, in Asia Pacific Rainbow Catholic organizations. We were able to come up with an Asia Pacific Forum on COVID-19 last year. Um, Other online activities. As for the LGBT in general in the Philippines, um, the pandemic was a challenge because since we do not have same-sex marriage in the Philippines, it's not recognized. LGBT families were not recognized as families. I mean, there are a handful of local government units that recognize LGBT couples as a family unit, and give them the same um, economic package that heterosexual families are given. But since some of them, most cities, so you are not entitled to what an heterosexual family are given. So LGBT are considered single people who just live together. So they're individuals, they're not families. Um, but we have a few cities that recognize LGBT relationships, and we have actually where I am right now in Quezon City. Um, During the vaccination drive, they actually have a special lane for senior citizens who are LGBTIQ.
Wow.
So they don't have to fall in line. They have special lines for LGBT senior citizens. So that's one positive uh, aspects improvement in the treatment of LGBT, because not all cities have anti-discrimination laws ordinances. Just several cities, like less than 10 cities have that. As for church leaders, most church leaders closed all churches upon the onset of the pandemic to prevent the spread of the virus within the community. But there were a few priests who would defy these orders and would still continue giving masses, and would actually say in their online masses that you have a weak faith. That's why you don't want to go to church, because you don't believe that the Lord will protect you from the virus. I mean, that is something uh, for me. I find it funny, but at the same time, it's not nice to be told, because it's like challenging. And then what if you get the virus? What, you'll blame the Lord that you got it because he didn't bless you enough. So, but there was just a few. There was instances of priests who later on tested positive for COVID, who celebrated mass without mask, and having some parishioners infected with COVID. But as a whole, the church was more supportive of the health protocols, strict health protocols initiative of the government. Um, it was not a political issue in the Philippines, the mask wearing. Um, we actually are mandated, or we are required to wear a face shield and a face mask in public, or we'll be fined if we are caught without it. And it's not really an issue to us because we know that we need it. So people understand the use and the need for it. So there are not a lot of people who are against these measures of the government.
Thanks, Miel. Great. I was going to ask a question about the politicization of public health. And, in my country, we have the influence of President Trump still with us. And many of the political and religious conservative organizations are very much anti-vax and anti-mask. And all of you have addressed that in your previous comments. So I don't think I'll need to go into that unless someone else has something special to say that was not stated. All of you have pretty much addressed that issue. So I'll go to the final question in respect of your time, because it's already 10 minutes after the hour. So how does the next 4 months look in your country, or the rest of the year? A return to some normalcy? I know that some of you still, like in the Philippines, are under lockdown. Is there fear of the Delta variant becoming much more widespread? Where do you see your country or your region next year? So I'll start again in the same order. And if you have something to say about the political situation, how public health has been politicized, please feel free to bring it up. But all of you have mentioned that in previous comments, so I'm kind of skipping over that. But Chris, go ahead. I'm going to put the question in the chat.
Yes, I think that what Miel has just said about the masses, I would like to hear from all of you, how is the situation on that in your regions? Because here also there has been huge conflicts over masses and cults, protests and cults, and it's been part of the politicization of the public health situation by Christian conservatives. But as to our prospects for the near future in the region are not good, neither in terms of the health situation, or the economic situation, or the political situation. And it's very important what has come up here about the situation of mental health, of spiritual, emotional, and physical abuse for our people in our community here. Due to the high circulation of the virus and the lack of vaccines and tests, we fear not only the Delta variant, but all the emergence of other variants of the virus. In Brazil, for instance, there's absolutely no lockdown, while the president openly politicizes the situation. He blames governors, mayors, and the Supreme Court for all the problems we have. He urges people not to lock down and not to use masks in the name of a supposed freedom to come and go. And as a result, people increasingly appear to live normally without masks, moving freely, while the pandemic continues.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Chris. Luca?
I wish I could have the crystal ball, Leo, but I don't know. I'm optimistic, but I think that return to normal will take times. Honestly speaking, the virus is a dramatic problem, but I think that in Europe we are likely to face another migrant crisis. the situation is getting worse following the dramatic situation in Afghanistan. Italy and Greece began registering increased numbers of refugee arrivals at the beginning of 2021 due to the confluence of wars and economic crisis in the Middle East. Another issue I want to mention is a project of law we are debating in Italy. It has to do with a proposed law that would criminalize violence and hate speeches against LGBTQ people. The debate on it has been very hard, and the Vatican has formally complained to our parliament that this law would harm the freedom of speech, as well as put Catholic schools at legal risk if they refuse to mark a national day against homophobia. We need this law. We need this law in Italy because Italy ranks lowest in Western Europe for gender equality, and a bill that criminalizes violence and hate speeches targeting a person's sexual orientation or identity is very important, is crucial. So this is, we have the coronavirus crisis, but we have other issues to cope with in the following months.
Thank you, Luca. Leaky?
So basically, I can say honestly, in Kenya for the next 3 to 4 months, it's still we are still in the worst position, based on the fact that the numbers of positivity rates keep on increasing daily. Because currently in Kenya we are around 310 cases being reported averagely on a daily basis, and also on the fact that we are at a political point of the country where we are heading to general election come next year. And we have seen various politicians trying to position themselves and conducting various campaigns, which also involve the aspect of social gathering. And also these put us more at risk of increasement in the number of positivity rate. So the country, I can say that at this point, we are not that much safer. And we're heading towards, especially as a country, is planning for the next general election.
Thank you, Leaky. Dumi?
Thanks, Leo. Yes, politically, there seems to be so much unity because there hasn't been any political party opposition or the ruling party going against the COVID fight or going against the vaccination. But there has been lots of encouragement from all the circles of politics. Talking about the coming 4 months, the future is uncertain. The numbers continue to rise with each and every day, with the hope that one day it will, the numbers will drop and come to zero. But yes, we live by the day. We live for today for tomorrow, and hoping that nothing bad happens to us. But yes, we live in hope, Leo.
Thank you very much, Dumi. And finally, Miel?
Okay. When they started rolling out the vaccine hesitancy in the Philippines was quite high, especially in the senior citizen population. But it slowly eroded when they saw the decrease in the number of cases that we were having, especially when the Delta variant when they said that the Delta variant was in the Philippines and it was more contagious than the previous variants. There were actually stampedes in vaccination sites because people suddenly wanted to be vaccinated. For me, that's a good sign because they see the importance of the vaccine. It's just a matter of controlling the population when they go to vaccination sites for the vaccination. But I'm concerned about this problem with the Moderna vaccine in Japan because for the past few weeks it's been Moderna vaccines that they're given here in the Philippines in vaccination sites. So probably it would affect how Filipinos would see the vaccines again because they would again perceive it as not safe. So the vaccine hesitancy would rise. and it's not the time for us to have vaccine hesitancy because we have rising number of cases. As for the next 4 months, I am hopeful that it will get better because they said we are nearing the peak of the infection in the country. Um, but as to the stability of the policies, it's hard to say because we're having the national elections. We're having our presidential elections next year. So basically, you could already see it in the news. Political news are slowly edging COVID news out of the picture. So I don't know how it would happen, how we would even have the elections next year if the pandemic is still very much as it is right now. But I am hopeful that things would get better. Um, Filipinos are learning, and we're slowly getting vaccinated. Vaccines are they keep arriving. So as more Filipinos get vaccinated, maybe the numbers would go down. But as Lucas said, it would take years before we could really go back to normal. So
Great. Yeah.
that's it.
Oh, thank you very much, Miel. We're actually at time right now. If any of you want to leave the Zoom, that's perfectly fine because we're already over the allotted time. But if you have maybe 3 or 4 minutes of final comments or questions to ask each other, please use the time now. Does anyone have any questions to ask the other panelists? Very brief questions and very brief responses if you want. Otherwise, I just want to thank you for your time. I know it's very inconvenient for people, middle of the day, middle of the night, and early morning for me. But I will make this recording available for you all once we post it on our website. And I encourage you to register for the virtual Dignity USA meeting September 11 and 12. You all have free registration, but it's horrible times for you. So, I'll make this recording available. Any final thoughts or questions? And please feel free to speak.
I've been trying to remember that we as Christians are the people of hope. So I hope our faith and our faith as individuals and our shared faith as communities may feed us and strengthen us to go through these hard times.
Very well said, Chris. And I want to echo that. This is an example of our community, from the US, from Italy, from Brazil, the Philippines, Kenya, and South Africa. We all have a very common faith and hope. And by connecting this way, I think we can advance that hope into our communities. Dumi, do you have a question?
My words of encouragement will be going to everybody probably watching this from wherever in the world. And I will say, in the words of Katharina of Siena, be who God meant you to be, and you will set the world on fire.
Thank you.
Meaning that you should be. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, if there are no further comments, I just want to again thank you very much for your time, for your insights. We all have common problems, but you all brought very different perspectives based on where you live, and we very much appreciate your perspective. Thanks very much. Have a good night, Miel. A good rest of the day to all of you, and my day is just starting. So thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Great week ahead.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. Nice seeing you all again. Bye-bye.
Nice seeing you too.
Bye.
Bye.
See you soon.
Bye.
See you soon. Yeah.